Hello and welcome to Free Expression from the Wall Street Journal opinion page. I'm Gerry Baker, editor-at-large of the Journal.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Free Expression with Gerry Baker.
This week, we're going to take a little bit of a break, I think a much-needed break from the usual inevitable hurly-burly of politics. And it being Thanksgiving week, going to talk about a very topical subject, which is the subject of giving. One of the things I think I've just always admired about America, long before I came here, long before I became an American myself, is this is a very generous country. People have enormously generous hearts, welcome people, give significant amounts of their own resources, but not just money, but time and energy and effort to those less fortunate. And it's been obviously, that's particularly true of the great philanthropists of the United States, who have been obviously the greatest philanthropists anywhere in probably the history of the planet. But just regular Americans, I think, have a real capacity for giving that is quite unusual. Actually, if not unique, then is quite rare in the world, and it's a particularly uplifting thing to see. And as you think about Thanksgiving, and we spend our Thanksgiving holiday not just watching football and stuck in large lines of traffic on highways. But Thanksgiving is very much a part of that generosity of spirit, because Thanksgiving is very much a part of understanding the blessings that we have and being grateful for the blessings that we have. And that itself is a statement of generosity. So I thought this week we'd look at what it means to be generous, what it means to be generous with our time, and how perhaps we can each individually, as well as more broadly as a society, be more giving, be more generous. And we've got, this week I've got a terrific guest who has written a book on the subject of giving. He himself has been a very significant philanthropist. John Studzinski, a financier, man who spent a long time in various financial institutions, the various senior positions in various financial institutions, now with PIMCO, the bond fund, but has also been very much involved in philanthropic opportunities throughout his life. And he has sort of drawn on these experiences and drawn on this background to write a book called A Talent for Giving: Creating a More Generous Society that Benefits Everyone. And it's about the importance of giving, how we can do more, what we can do. And again, very much important to understand that it's not just about giving money or giving our resources, but about giving, and indeed the point of the title is that giving of our talents, that we're all blessed with various talents, and how we can find ways not just to benefit ourselves, obviously, with those talents, but to benefit others and to benefit society more generally. So this Thanksgiving week, I'm very happy to welcome John Studzinski. Thanks very much indeed for joining Free Expression.
Jerry, thank you.
Congratulations on the book. It's a fascinating book, very timely, in time for Thanksgiving here in the United States and the Christmas season, the holiday season. It's called A Talent for Giving, which is a very interesting title straight off. Perhaps we don't think about giving as a talent particularly. We think about it as, something that, is maybe an obligation or something that one has an inclination to do. Tell us what you mean by a talent for giving, and indeed tell us what the book's about.
Well, the obvious thing that it's not about is it's not implying that the author has a talent for giving.
Although fair to say you have established that, but we can get into that a little bit.
And some people's reaction has been, this is another grandiose book on philanthropy by someone who's a philanthropist, and it couldn't be far from what that is. I think we all associate giving and philanthropy with money, wealth, power, establishment, track record. And what this is trying to say is that God gives us all talents, and many of those talents we don't know in our youth, and over time, perhaps we can have them nurtured and unearthed. But it's really those talents that I see as our currency in lieu of money or power or network. we all have some obligation, I think, to try to better understand how we can use our God-given talents as a genuine currency to take forward and create some type of movement, activism, or momentum for the common good.
So in a sense, I think, forgive me if I'm not quite phrasing this correctly, but it seems like a talent for giving is almost a pun, because one thinks about a talent for something like having a talent for sports or a talent for mathematics. Your point about a talent is that we have talents. We all have talents. And part of having those talents, part of the joy of having those talents, but something also the obligation and the duty of having those talents is to give them, is to use those talents for giving, to give them away. Is that correct? Is that the way in which you're talking about talent here?
I think talent is something that's part of you. And I think real philanthropy, real giving, real partnership is about sharing part of you with someone else, or with a problem, or with a situation where you think you can actually create a more positive outcome or solution. It's interesting because the scriptures today in the church relate to Jesus observing a woman in the temple who is very poor, but she gives a substantial amount of her income and what's needed for her to survive, really part of herself, to philanthropy in the temple. And he's saying that it is far more powerful to give part of yourself than to give your extra savings or wealth. And this is really the same thing. I think I'm noticing as people read this book and think about their own talents, they're actually discovering that they get much more out of giving when they actually see it as a ongoing partnership or exercise or project, or most importantly, a relationship rather than a transaction.
Is the book intended as a how-to guide, how to give? Is it intended as a kind of an inspiration for people to give more? Is it intended to just to emphasize the importance of giving as part of our, we all have talents as part of it, part of our responsibility? How would you characterize the book, or maybe who in your mind were you writing the book for as you wrote it?
It's interesting you use the word write. I didn't write the book. I dictated the book because I found it, and as you know, the book is in the first person. And I dictated it in the first person as a personal experience, as a personal journey. And because it was more of a meditation, I decided to use a structure of T's: time, talent, treasure, power of two, temerity, tenacity, ties, technology, to create a structure around which I would meditate and think. So each chapter is a separate meditation. They can be read out of order. It's very personal because it is a meditation. And it's really aimed at anyone who sees themselves as to wanting to become more engaged. It's interesting, Gerry, I've done a lot of focus groups with young people. And when you convene young people and ask them, what are you passionate about? They look at you, and I'm not sure they're positive or passionate about too many things today in this environment. And, there's a lot of issues around mental health, the role of social media, and a lot of the things that have come out in the wonderful book by Jonathan Haidt, The Anxious Generation. But if you get that same group and you ask them what they're angry about, what they're frustrated about, and how they think that anger should be channeled, what I call righteous anger, they can quickly come up with a long list of things. So I really trying to enable young people to see that giving and being part of solving problems to enhance the common good is incumbent on everyone. It should be a grassroots movement. It should be a grassroots initiative. It's not something that you can say, I'm going to rely on just the government to solve this problem. I'm going to rely on corporations to solve this problem. I'm going to rely on the church to solve this problem. I'm going to rely on the media to solve this problem. Some of the most interesting initiatives have come from individuals who create movements because they have a talent. It may be an insight of managing people, convening people. It's interesting, this generation of young people who they're often referred to as snowflakes, and I've written a lot about this, and many people in the business world regard people in the demographic of 15 to 30 as being very high maintenance. When you actually talk to them, what you discover is they may be high maintenance because they have very strong sense of humanity. They're becoming less enamored with social media, and they're more re-engaging with one-to-one communication. So I think this group, adolescence all the way to the adulthood, early adulthood, is a period where this book can perhaps galvanize people to see giving as more part of one's daily, weekly, or monthly lifestyle, as opposed to something you do as an extracurricular activity.
This is emphatically not a political discussion, and I don't want it to become one. But is the do you think that we as a society suffer from an insufficiency of the sort of the giving motivation? I mean, we look at the various pathologies in our society: hyper partisanship, an increasing polarization. This country in particular, I mean, you've spent your life mostly in America and Britain, very similar kind of pathologies in both countries, a lot of dissatisfaction. I mean, the level of popular dissatisfaction. And again, this book is not in any way a kind of a scold or a kind of rebuke or indeed any sort of political commentary. But do you think that maybe there just isn't enough emphasis among not just the young people, but as society as a whole, on the importance of giving? That if we were more focused on giving, perhaps rather than focusing on our own concerns and all the things that address us, we might overcome some of those pathologies that actually currently exist in our society.
It's an excellent question. It's at the heart of the book. I think the book it doesn't really talk about large-scale, successful, foundation-delivered, billionaire-driven philanthropy. I think the large billionaires that we know of, the likes of people like Bill Gates, have made an extraordinary contribution in a whole range of areas, whether it's education or healthcare across the world. This really is trying to help people understand from a very early age that every individual, and maybe it's something that I picked up. I spent a considerable amount of time in an earlier part of my life with Mother Teresa in Calcutta. And she would constantly chastise people, including me, when I was trying to get too much done or be too ambitious. And she'd say, steady on. You can only change the world one person at a time. Focus on the individual. And I think individuals have to see that they can have impact. They can have transformational impact on an individual level if they can do things. And some of these projects that people start out with, if they've got some ideas, they can start them out as a pilot. They can start them out in a very modest level. They don't necessarily have to have very grandiose metrics or things. They can really be focusing on how can I, this generation I find very interesting, Gerry. They have a very strong power for convening, and they're very good at convening. And this isn't just true in Anglo-American societies. It certainly is true with young people in China and other countries. This generation has a very clever talent for convening. And I think that can be used to create even more change and more constructive change in movements. And it may well be, I think, that there's a lot of, I know this is not about politics or economics, But I also think, because we talk about the fiscal deficit, and many young people have said, well, when they get to that point where they are playing a more dominant role in government, they will take a much more conservative view about the fiscal deficit. So to me, they are conscious of that, but they feel as though this is incumbent on a demographic, on an age-related thing. And what I'm trying to say, focus on your talent, focus on what you observe, and then try to create a framework for creating a more constructive, generous society. The other thing I try to clarify in this book is the difference between charity and philanthropy. And it's very simple. Charity is, and it's not something that's unimportant, it's very important. Charity is giving someone a fish. It's giving a homeless person a meal, giving a homeless person a place to sleep, giving them some guidance on healthcare, versus teaching them to fish, which may be trying to help them develop life skills, develop job skills, help them manage their time so that they can hold a job for a period of time. So we have to do both. And I think when you're thinking of your talent and you're thinking of issues you want to grapple with in a community or in a bigger scale, you have to think about, is it charity? Which sometimes I think we have to be honest. Charity can be a transaction. It can be a one-way, you write a check, or you donate food, and it's over. You don't necessarily establish a relationship or a long-term goal. Philanthropy, I think, has more of a multiplier effect. And I personally would say to anyone listening to this, that if you engage in true philanthropy in a partnership way, you'll find that whatever you give, the multiplier effect of that, the true multiplier effect of that will be something that will come back to you in many generous ways, perhaps tenfold.
You talk in the book about the concept of entrepreneurial giving, a concept you use. Explain what that is.
Well, I think a good entrepreneur is someone who doesn't see problems as obstacles. They see a problem as an opportunity to correct, alter, change, or introduce something that creates not only a solution, but an opportunity for them or for a group of people. So I think that's a lot of entrepreneurs find gaps in the market and introduce a product. Entrepreneurial philanthropy is perhaps identifying a problem or a situation or something that's not right in the market, and not seeing it as an obstacle or a negative, but seeing how do you actually reconfigure that as a positive.
Give us some examples, because again, you've as I said in my introduction, again, you probably don't like the term philanthropist, but you've dedicated a lot of your life to giving, to volunteering, to contributing to, as you say, contributing to the common good in ways, particularly with several major initiatives that you've been involved in the UK. Give us some examples of the kind of things that you've been involved in. Now, again, if I may say so, you're a man of some resources. Not everybody can have the impact that you've had. But tell us from your experience what you've done and the ways in which perhaps that people who don't have as much wealth as you do can what lessons they can draw from that in their own lives and the kind of things that they can do.
Well, I mean, we can start when I was 6 years old. I grew up in a working class part of North Boston, Peabody, Massachusetts, and it became clear to me that there were a number of people who, and it was very much a middle class or blue collar community, but it was very clear to me that there were some people who had just come to this country, and this was 1962. So I said to my mother in the church, I said, we should make an announcement and just talk about, we know all these people. I grew up in the Polish-Italian community where people were very, the talent of the community was cooking, hospitality, giving. So my reaction was, everyone we know is a very good cook. So we have this ability. Why don't we just have everybody provide a certain amount of food, and we can use the church and advertise one night a week, and we'll serve food. And within 2 weeks, we were having about 100 people a night. And what was interesting is when people realized that their talent for cooking or hospitality was being put to use, they wanted to be part of that community. So that's a simple example. When I was 15 and 16, I went to a Catholic prep school in north of Boston. The WSJCs said to a group of us, if you've got projects or anything that we can develop across the US, we need to understand, we need to create a project, not a problem. We need to solve a problem. We need to create a project because we've got a set of funds and we've got this network in 48 states. So I thought, and I said, and they said it should be targeted at adolescents and it should be transformational. So I went and visited a group of public health nurses in Boston. And I said, if you were to do anything that was interesting right now, they said, well, the biggest gap right now is that the communicable diseases right now are going up, and venereal disease and gonorrhea and syphilis in New England and in America. And no one's dealing with it. So I went back to the JCs and I said, why don't we create a nationwide toll-free hotline of adolescents, staffed by adolescents, anonymous, giving information on communicable diseases to adolescents. And rather than say you're out of your mind, they said, well, if you can figure out how to do it, we'll support it financially. So that was an idea. We came with an idea. It took us about a month to contact a number of Catholic high schools across America. And we created a network. We created hotlines. And it's still going today. And of course, the funniest, you'll appreciate this, Gerry, with your astute political background as a journalist and editorial guru, is we had billboards across America that had the current president and vice president of the United States and their wives. And the billboard said, 1 out of every 4 people at some point in their life will come into contact with a communicable disease. And and with the phone number.
Yeah.
And that galvanized young people to get on the phone and talk about it. And it was transformational in terms of the public health reaction because it was adolescents serving adolescents.
Yeah.
So there was an element of trust there. It was not, and that's probably a very good entrepreneurial example of where they said, look, figure out something where there's a need.
Yeah. And then again, just briefly, if you would, the 2 major projects that I know you've been involved in the UK, the Passage, which is a homeless support for the homeless in London, and the Genesis project. Just tell us briefly again what they do and more importantly, what impact you think they've had.
Well, the core of my my giving, and this is a conversation I think everybody should try to nurture in their own peer group or in their own family or in their own community, which is, what is important to you in trying to be part of the community? And I go back to my faith, which is, why is it the common good? When Christ prescribed to a group of his apostles how to pray, you remember he said, our Father. He didn't say my Father or your Father. He said our Father, implying the community of mankind, of civilization. So for me, that links very much to the common good, our Father. I'm interested in doing projects that support and enhance human dignity. because I see the face of Christ in people. So the Passage is the largest daycare center now in London. It's 45 years old. It was founded by Cardinal Hume and myself at the time to solve a big problem in Westminster.
So this is Cardinal Basil Hume, who was the
Cardinal
former
Basil Hume, who was a former
primate of England.
He was the Cardinal Archbishop, and he came out of he was a Benedictine monk who actually reluctantly became Cardinal Archbishop of Westminster. He was one of the best. Will probably be a saint someday. But he, and he taught me a lot. We would walk the streets of London and talk to homeless people. And at that point, it became very clear that we had to create some type of safe space for homeless people to come. And, homeless people are not, they've had many issues in their lives that have what I call have destroyed the legs on their table. And as a result, they don't trust. So it's not as easy as you think to set up a homeless project, homeless center, and get people to come in and just shake your hand and smile and have lunch or dinner with you. That's not necessarily. They've come from tough backgrounds. Many of them have been robbed, abused, misled, and have come from sometimes difficult relationships. So that is still, that's part of the bigger homeless network that serves the UK today. And we set that up. And I strongly believe, and again, everyone listening to this, I strongly believe that when one starts a project, one should at some point start out to be a volunteer and actually just work doing basic work in a project day to day, so you actually learn what's going on. And then at some point migrate and maybe drop that and migrate to a board role or a governance role. So you see organizations from 2 or 3 different perspectives. And that way you develop a much better sense of what the project is and and what role and talent is continuing to be needed. The Genesis Foundation is celebrating its 25th year. It's aimed at nurturing young artists. Gerry, I'm sure there was a point in your life where someone gave you your first job, or your first apprenticeship, or your first internship, or someone trusted you, and you were thrilled because you finally had something to talk about, and you were learning. And in the art culture, whether you're an actor, painter, photographer, set designer, choral scholar, the ability to get your first break sometimes is tied to your socioeconomic background. If you come from an upper middle class background, your family may know people, and therefore it might be a lot easier. But I started the Genesis Foundation that I wanted all people from all walks of life, all demographics, to have an equal chance at doing something with the creative industries. And I define the creative industries broadly because I think it's probably one of the greater strengths of the UK and London and across the UK. The creative industries remain, I think, one of the more strategic and crown jewels of the UK.
What do you say to people who read this book and are inclined and indeed maybe inspired by the book to go to do more, to give more? Where they will, again, to be clear, we're talking not just about money, we're talking about time, we're talking about effort, we're talking about energy, all of these things that you talk about in the book. What do you say to those who say they're inclined to do more, but there's a kind, I don't want to describe it as cynicism, but there's a sense that it doesn't really work, that charity, and I know you carefully distinguish between charity and philanthropy, but that giving creates a dependency that actually okay, we know that, the old line, which again you used earlier, give a man a fish and he eats for a day, and teach him how to fish and he eats for the rest of his life. But there is a sense, and indeed there's a lot of evidence too, that sort of a lot of official giving, overseas aid and this kind of stuff, does actually create dependency, doesn't really resolve the problems. I can think of times in my own life, in my own family, when we have helped people with charity, giving, philanthropy, whatever you want to call it, and they've quickly gone back to their old ways. It hasn't really helped them. what do you say to people who are maybe a little bit, as I say, maybe a little bit cynical, a little bit kind of inhibited and restrained from doing more because they just wonder about the effectiveness? I mean, can you assure people? Can you give examples that actually it really does make a difference and it really does change things?
I think the thing that has addresses your question, it's an excellent question because people are we're living in a world today because it's on a grand scale. People are metrics driven. So it's a question of, well, if I give a certain amount of money to this problem, how many people are going to be, lives are going to be transformed? And it's not that simple. We're dealing with human beings here. We're dealing with complex human beings. And as I referenced earlier, you can only change the world one person at a time. So one of the things you've got to do, and I often think if people are apprehensive or cynical or very, very nervous, I think you start on a very modest scale and try to see, it may be, Gerry, that some people have to develop what I call the power of two, a mentoring relationship first with a small group of people, and then discover that they actually can have an impact on people's lives as a mentor. I think this is about incremental. This isn't about, everyone's not going to scale this on day one, because this isn't about money. This is about looking at what you feel needs to be addressed, and then you feel and how you personally want to play a role in it. And I've seen a lot of people very cynical about it, and I've encouraged them. I've taken quite a few of them with me to the shelter, where they've watched me encourage. One of the things I do is on Christmas Day, on the morning Christmas Day, I go to the passage. And people who are really cynical about this, I often invite them to come with me. And of course, because it's Christmas, everyone wants to feel that they're doing something good. So people will often come with me and they'll watch me encourage people who are homeless, in some cases mentally very fragile, physically abused or mentally abused. And I go through an exercise where I try to get them to call on a mobile phone their husband, their wife, their children, their parents. And it takes time, but 4 or 5 or 6 people later, when they've all made contact and they've had a constructive conversation, they will sit there and say, how did you do that? For 3 or 4 hours, you watched them, you encouraged them. And then they realized, and they could be completely so energized by seeing how stimulating it is to see the look on people's faces when they have a conversation with their son who they haven't talked to in 2 years or something like that. So, the human being is a fragile, complex animal. And if you want to deal with the problems, we're not dealing with artificial intelligence here. We're dealing with the human intelligence. And that has another layer. It has a soul, it has an ego, and it has great fears and fragilities. And that's what you have to navigate. So when people are cynical, I said, well, look, how much time have you spent? If you're looking at it through the shop window, you need to roll up your sleeves and either volunteer. And if people don't want you to volunteer and they just want your money, well, then you should part company with them pretty quickly, because probably it's not the right culture. And that's where you should start before you even think about starting your own project.
We're almost out of time. So a quick question and then a closing question. How do we decide whom to give to? Who deserves, or whom we feel most needs our giving, our generosity? It's obviously we're all faced with choices in that sense, but it particularly springs to mind because earlier this year we had this whole rather strange theological debate here in the United States when when the Pope, the former Pope Francis, talked about the the importance of that we needed to look after everybody. We had a responsibility as Christians or as fellow humans to the rest of the world. It was kind of implied as a criticism of anti-immigration sort of measures and policies. J.D. Vance, Vice President, a Catholic, said, no, we have an obligation. Charity starts at home, as it were, in the famous phrase. People were quoting the famous Thomas Aquinas Ordo Amoris doctrine, the idea that there is an order of responsibility that we have, that, immediate family, community, whatever, those people get our charity. But how do you approach this? And again, for someone reading this book who's inspired to go and give more, where do they, and again, I'm not for a moment suggesting you're going to tell them who to give their time and money and talents to, but how do you approach that, and how should people make that decision about there are so many needs out there and so many demands? How do they make that choice?
I love this question because it's there is no perfect answer. There is no answer. The best way to navigate the question is the following. If I have my own personal, everyone listening to this will have their own personal observations about the current state of the world. And if they could do one or two things to change either their family, their personal relationships, their community, or the country, or a set of medical issues, they would do it. And perhaps you address one of those. On the other hand, Gerry, sometimes something amazingly happens out of the blue. Like the JCs contacting me when I was an adolescent. And my immediate reaction to that is that this is divinely inspired. Mm-hmm. I really do believe that I don't believe in random events. Mm-hmm. I think, you and I have known each other a long time. There's reasons why people have relationships. There's reasons why friendships exist, why trust exists. And a lot of that all comes from the divine. And I think sometimes when something comes out of the blue, Pope Francis asked me one day, I got summoned to Rome. I walked in and he said, I need your help to focus on modern slavery and human trafficking, because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it needs someone with a business framework to put some structure into what we're doing and how religious sisters are working to fight this issue and this problem. And that was fine. My immediate reaction was, well, I'm not so sure, Holy Father, how I will help. But of course, he said, no, you can help, and I'll tell you how. And that was that. And immediately my reaction was, he wasn't asking me for money. Mm. He didn't want a penny. He was asking for my engagement. And I think what this book does, it tries to ask people to say, how can I be engaged? It's almost like challenging people in a society where people are increasingly disenfranchised for one reason or another, or abdicating their lives to social media. How do I re-engage in society, potentially for the common good, using some of the ideas, some of the frameworks, some of the different approaches that are sort of tabled in this book as a possible starting point.
Final question then, sort of almost a philosophical question, really about the point of giving. Who gains more from giving, the giver or the person who receives? I'm kind of wondering that old sort of conundrum about altruism. Is altruism? Do we do things for good for themselves, or do we do things for good because we get a kick out of it, or somehow it helps us ultimately? In which case, it's not really altruistic. What's the right way to think about the value of giving for both for ourselves and for others and for society as a whole?
Well, this is something. There is the power of giving, where people feel as though checkbook philanthropy. They write a check. They're part of a community of givers.
And they feel good about it.
They feel good about it for a period of time. They're part of it has a social connotation. That's not what this book is about. I've seen. There's a funny vignette in the story about me being in McDonald's at 2 a.m. And I bought I would do this a lot on Saturday nights. I would work the night shift, and I was sometimes, when people are hungry, we get up at 2 a.m. and we go to McDonald's. So I take 10 guys to McDonald's, and one, and it is some responsibility, because the police sometimes worry that something could go wrong or whatever. So I'm there, and I bought everybody a dessert, an apple tart, after they had their meal. And one of them turned to me and said, "Hey, Gov, I really would prefer cherry." And my first reaction was, I was tired, and I was freezing. And my first reaction was to get slightly thin. And then I smiled and laughed and thought, he really likes me and trusts me enough to see me as taking care of him. Mm. And I felt at this point very protective.
So it wasn't ingratitude; it was almost a kind of it was
like a family
collegiality.
It was like a collegiality.
Yeah,
it was like
sort of fraternity.
When a family member just says to you, can we have more? Can we have more ketchup or something? And I came away, and I've said this. Other people have come on these night walks with me, and they experience. It's like the vignette I gave you about the mobile phone on Christmas morning. There's so many examples. So there's no question. The multiplier effect for the giver is 10 times more. That's not where you're doing it, because ultimately the beneficiary is the beneficiary. And it's not just the beneficiary, it's what you're doing for the broader community of mankind. Remember, that's the goal and objective here. This is not just the individual. It's the individual as one person who is a domino effect. Mm. Because every time you affect one person, that person has an impact on other people. And I think we have to remember that. And you can come up with lots of cynicism and say, well, it's not altruism. You use the word altruism. It is altruism, because you are net contributing benefits to the society, benefits to individuals, and ultimately benefits to yourself.
In which case, then, as I say, it's not really altruism, but I take the point. Well, John, that's a very good note on which to end a very, very, very apt Thanksgiving conversation on free expression. Thanks very much, John Studzinski, for joining Free Expression. The book is A Talent for Giving and Creating a More Generous Society that Benefits Everyone. So, John Studzinski, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Gerry, thank you.
Well, that's it for this week's episode. Thanks very much indeed for joining Free Expression this week. I'll be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, I hope you have a very happy, peaceful, restful, I hope, Thanksgiving. Enjoy the holiday and be thankful for your blessings. I'm enormously thankful for mine. And I look forward to speaking to you again next week. In the meantime, as I say, happy Thanksgiving, and speak to you then.